import, export to the next port. The whole world is shifting. We have a lot of dynamic activity happening across borders as you go through. One of the interesting things we need to talk about is the aspect of exports to a thing called FDI, which is foreign direct investment. Really, normally you go through, you expect the exports to decline as FDI increases. What happens is that, first of all, you start exporting their product. In other words, keep in mind, remember, import you buy, export you sell. So as a country, you're selling goods to this country over here. And then as you become more established, you start doing foreign direct investment. You start putting money into the infrastructure and the plants and the assembly of your product in the other country. It's called foreign direct investment. It's really increased an awful lot. And you would think that as you export and when you sit down and build a solid relationship with another country, that you start putting more FDI or foreign direct investment into it and you reduce the amount of exports. But let's go through and take a look. Look at the changes in FDI. It's gone nearly 1.5 trillion, okay, from the US from 2013 to 2017. In a 4-year period, it's that big when it comes down to it. You're looking at a massive change, but has exports declined as the FDI increase? So here's the change over here. You can actually see between them all, and we talk about goods and services, because there's an awful lot of services involved. So don't think about just making product and selling it. It's making product and selling it, and also providing services and selling those services. They're all part of FDI, goods and services. So here's an example. First of all, exports from North America, Latin America, Africa, and Middle East decreased since 1983. Exports from Asia nearly doubled in the same time period, with China accounting for 83% of the increase. Really, when you start looking at it, you've got international trade is up trends from countries like Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, from poverty nations to highly developed nations, often in the process of having a solid middle class and a different class. In a lot of cases, these countries, they had an upper class, which is massively wealthy, and a lower class with nothing. Now you clearly see that they have multiple groups. They have a middle class that's emerged now into different things. In China, 500 million Chinese have been lifted out of poverty by China's trade different policies. International trade has really helped an awful lot of nations move from a undeveloped status into a developed nation status. And a lot of it, they're changing aspects of the power from one aspect to a new part as you go over here. International trade has grown since 1990 by $4 trillion. The volume grew to 23 trillion across the entire globe in 2017, and it's even bigger now. We're going to still count some of the years as to what happened with COVID and how that changed everything. World trade really decreased since 1983, increased from Asia as you go through, and you really want to look at the merchandise and the service exports. So we're going to look at the different aspects of the exports and some of the positive and the negative consequences for all the different nations. Here is a comparison. This is just recently updated with 2020 numbers as you go through. You're going to see the merchandise exports. We're breaking it into really two different components, merchandise or product and service as you go through. Keep in mind the United States when it comes down to looking as to what is our overall mix. Back in the 70s, we were about a 60-40 mix. About 40% of our economy was dedicated to making things, something tangible as you go through, and 40% was services. That started changing as the US started having additional foreign direct investment into other countries by moving a lot of manufacturing industries out of the United States into other countries. Then also we had a mix that really developed into the mid-90s of an 80-20 mix. 80% services and only 20% manufacturing. We've seen it shift a little bit. It went up to almost 82% services, and then it just about since 2016, it dropped back down to 80-20. We'll see what happens in the days to come. But generally, let's look at the merchandise. You'll see China by far really has the largest amount of merchandise exporters, followed closely pretty much by the European Union. But look at where the US is. You really have dropped a lot on merchandise itself. But when it comes to importing, the US dominates the world for goods coming into the country as you go through. We'll talk about us being a trade debtor nation in regards to that later on. But you'll see when it comes down to goods coming into the US, What's surprising though is China, even though China is #1 on merchandise exporters, it also is a huge importer as well. So you see the different rankings as you go through, and really this ranking is substantially different from 2017, as you'll see different parts of it. You'll also see in days to come, Hong Kong has truly been absorbed at this point by China and probably will not be counted separately in the years to come. Here's service exporters, and look at this. The US exports more services, a lot more services than any other country, and it also provides more services, a lot more services than any other country. So you'll see us, when we talk about service, we do a lot of worldwide service exporting and importing in the process as you go out in the process. So we talk about the import-export to the next port, FDI increase, yet no change in the importing of goods. Okay, if anything, it's dropped. Okay, we divide trade into goods and services. In the US, our economy is divided 80-20, and trade agreements are becoming the new norm, and we'll see a lot of shifting in positions among the world rankings as we go progress through our series here on international business. Take care.